Hey, I'm Rachel Hession, the creator and host of the Springboard Music Podcast. And this season, you'll be hearing from
President, Jesus Culture Music,
the Executive Director,
a Production Manager,
the SVP of Marketing and Digital,
lead YouTube operations,
the CEO at Adarga Entertainment Group,
and you're listening to the Springboard
Music Podcast.
It's not about education, because at the end of the day, these students are getting educated at their schools, right? Like, they're going to learn how to build a radio station. So it doesn't have anything to do with that. It's more about what did it look like for Rachel to get to the position she's in right now? So what was her career path? What did she graduate from college, or did she? How did she land her first job? And then what are the resources that she used through her experience to get to where she is?
Our interview today is with Michelle Younkman. She is the director of CMB, Christian Music Broadcasters, which focuses on resourcing all of the Christian stations, primarily in the United States, but also turns out to be a global reach as well. Michelle is somebody who I have looked up to for several years. Her grace, her innovation, her cheer, and her support for what we do is incredible and unparalleled. So I want to start with just asking you, because this will be a theme throughout your story. Can we just start at the end of the story of like, what is CMB?
That's a great question. So CMB, Christian Music Broadcasters, is an organization that brings radio stations together, and for the purpose of educating them, and also for them to be empowered to reach more people. So at the end of the day, everything that we do is really kind of filtered through. We want radio stations to reach more people in more places for Jesus, and all the education that we provide for that, all of the connections that we provide with artists, that's all a part of it, because at the end of the day, we want these radio stations to really excel at what they're doing. And so everything we do is really kind of filtered through that. And like, if somebody comes to us and it doesn't really kind of mesh with our vision or our mission, then we'll be like, yeah, hey, that's great, but we're going to kind of stick to our lane, which is really focusing on radio. But also with the exponential growth, just with technology, and really helping radio stations understand and grasp where technology is going, because people are always going to listen to the radio. Like, people have said for years, oh, radio's dying. Well, the numbers don't show that. But the way that people consume radio looks different today than it did 5 years ago. And our job is really to help these radio stations understand and be in there and kind of know where the puck is going, so that they can make sure to skate there and be ready for the transition to like more digital. And so what does that look like? And how can we bring that knowledge to them and be kind of like a one-stop shop? So they need education, regardless of their position at a radio station. Hopefully CMB is going to provide that for them.
Is there anything else like CMB that somebody might be participating in? You're like, hey, this is how we do things differently. Or are you kind of the only one in that market?
So that's a great question. We really are the only ones that focus on Christian music radio. So there's NRB that's out there, and they focus on like all sorts of media. So they're into film. They're more into talk radio than music radio. So that's kind of like their niche. But as far as focusing on music radio, we're kind of an anomaly like that. So we really kind of look at, like, what does CRS do? So CRS, Country Radio Seminars, which is our counterpart in the country space. Like, we want to learn from them to see how they're bringing education to their audience, their constituents, and what can we learn from that to take to our people that will help Christian radio grow.
Something that I'm consistently blown away about every time I come to like and we'll talk about this, but Momentum, which is like the largest, like the number one conference that you guys host, because you do summits, but it's like the conference every year, is how international it is. Like, so many international Christian stations show up. Did that just happen, or did you intentionally market like that? How did it spread beyond just like nationally?
So I would say like some of our stations here in the States have like partnerships with some of these international stations. So like in Canada, Australia, London, and it's really just really word of mouth because a lot of those places don't have a conference like Momentum to go to. And I've been to the one in Australia who like our counterpart is called Christian Media Arts. And there's like three other A's. So like they're kind of focusing on radio, but also the arts part of it too, but not just radio, like all artistry is really kind of under their umbrella. So they don't have anything that's really in that lane. And this is where they're like, hey, if we can come and learn more about how we can do a better job in radio, then that has attracted them to come and be a part of it. We end up, gosh, Rachel, with probably 10, 12 different countries represented, which is amazing. Like, I'm like, I don't, we try to make it so that it's affordable. Like we don't, because we know it's really expensive for them to have to catch a flight all the way over here and really just looking at, okay, how can we best serve them? So as we kind of saw that kind of pick up, and as I went to their conference in Australia, I was like, it helped me kind of see things like through their eyes and go, wow, like I've never been to Australia. Like what would I want as a international person to understand more about this conference or even Australia or even just the whole city that I was in? It was called Gold Coast, which is an amazing place in Australia. And, but really just learning through that and bringing that experience back to me, with me to Momentum and go, hey, like, can we do like an international gathering like with these people? Because they may be in totally different continents, but is there a way that there's still that connectivity? So like in Australia, Rachel, they do like a mixed format. So they're very much like, hey, we'll play a Christian song next to a secular song. And for them, that works. In our marketplace, stations tried it. Oh my goodness, probably 20 years ago. And it never worked. And I think it goes back to something that I first heard. I did not make this up. David Pierce from EMF told me, he's like, when I stick my hand in a box of Captain Crunch, I want to know that I'm getting Captain Crunch out of that box.
Totally.
So when you tune into a station and you're like, you're hearing Justin Timberlake and then you're hearing, Casting Crowns, you may be like, wait, but it works for Australia and that's great. Like we don't want to make any changes. We're not trying to change what they do by any means because they know their listeners better than anybody. So we want to help them with tools on how do you understand your listeners or how do you take it to the next level. So that's what we do for internationals. We love having those international people though. So, but that's not a question I'm asked very often. So I love that question.
Well, it just always is so exciting to me when I walk around Momentum and I see people who are like, I'm from London or I'm from a lot of like Africa. There's, some random places. And I'm like, how did you hear about this? Because I think there's a misconception that Momentum is just like national or that CMB is just national. And it's so much beyond that. So let's take it from the beginning of like how you got to be executive director and how you got to be at CMB. So like because obviously I don't think this is a job or a position people would know exists just off the bat of right. I want to run this. I want to run CMB, but it's so important and so special. So I want to like honor your journey there. Where did you go to college? Did you know like you wanted to be in music?
So I went to John Brown University, and I majored in broadcasting and business there. And I was not a Christian music fan at all. Like I was more into, I know this will shock you, Rachel, but like Run DMC, Beastie Boys, like that was my jam back in the day. It also shows how old I am. And so, if I'm being honest, like all my, legalistic friends would be like, hey, you're going to go to hell because you listen to that music. And I'm like,
oh my gosh,
no, I'm not. Like, and so, but my thing was, hey, when God convicts me to listen to Christian music, then I'll listen to Christian music. So in 1988, that was a really long time ago, I went to my very first Gospel Music Association week. So that's kind of just like Momentum, but that one kind of focused on all of Christian music, whether you're a promoter, bookseller, all those different areas within the Christian music industry. And so CMB was a part of that at that time. And so when I went, sure enough, I was like, oh my gosh, like as a believer, if I don't support this music, then who will?
Wait, why did you go in the first place if you weren't a huge Christian music fan?
Well, because I was a broadcasting major. And hey, we got extra bonus points if we went to this conference. So Michelle needed every single bonus point I could get. You know what I mean? So that's why I even went. Like I didn't like DC Talk was up for new artist of the year that year. You know, like, and I didn't even really know who they were, you know?
Yeah.
But it was very interesting and just really cool to see it. I mean, I can remember, so like John Hull is like a legend in our industry. He's now at Hope Media Group's KSBJ in Houston. And I can remember him. He was in Colorado Springs at the time. And Word Records did some sort of game and they had all this silly spray. And I can vividly remember like he was sitting there with all this silly spray all over him. And so I had no idea who he was at that time, which really kind of showed me that it's such a small industry and relationships are so important because John Hull's no longer in Colorado Springs. Now he's in Houston. And because radio is really in his blood, those people are going to be around for a long time, you know? And
totally.
So that really started it all for me was I really wanted to then start a Christian radio station in Tulsa. So I grew up in Tulsa. The station that was there, I like to say that they're like an AOR station all over the road where it was like, they just didn't, they were horrible. Like they didn't know how to play what does a clock rotation look like?
Oh,
so my thing was I want to learn how to do this so I can start a Christian radio station, full music in Tulsa. And I thought that the best way to do that was to go to Nashville and have a bird's eye view of all of the Christian radio stations in the country and be able to take like what works at this station and what works at that station and be able to take that knowledge with me to be able to start a station in Tulsa. Since then, Bob Thornton, who's an amazing programmer there, came in. So they were bought by a company out of Wichita. And so he was programming both the Wichita station and the Tulsa station. And he was doing an amazing job. So we no longer needed a Christian radio station in Tulsa. And so I learned all this information. So like, what am I going to do with it now? Right.
Yeah. Did you feel kind of lost? You were like, well, somebody took my dream and now I don't know what to do about it.
You know, I think that I really loved working on like the label side of things. So that was such a great experience. And when I left Nashville and moved to Dallas, which Dallas being like the number one Christian music radio city in the country, right? Like we've got all these stations that are there. It's definitely like a mecca for Christian music. So like, you know, being in the Bible Belt. And so that was great. Like if I was going to move away from Nashville, Dallas was the best place to go. And that allowed me to do independent promotions. And what I loved about that, and I know you know what I'm saying when I say this, is like, I got to actually pick and choose the artists that I worked with. So
Totally.
I'm not being forced to work with somebody that like maybe, I mean, I'm going to work them because that's my job, but I might not be as loyal to one artist as I might the next artist. But when you do it for yourself, like you can decide that, oh, I am so passionate about this artist. And that to me really translates when you work with different radio stations and trying to get them to play your music or working with them on promotions around your artist. So for me, that was really, I loved my time in Nashville. I love my time working for a record company. And eventually though, after 3 kids, it's like, okay, am I going to keep doing this? Because, for me, I really felt like it was important to not just know KSBJ, but to know how many listeners are they reaching each week? What were they like in the latest book? And like everything there is to know about KSBJ, sometimes so much, even more than they knew. And I felt like that was important. And when you have 3 kids, to be on that level is just not even really possible in my mind. And so I could not keep up with all, 100 radio stations and all those numbers. Cause those, those numbers are changing every week or every book. So that's when I said, let me just step back. And I just had one client that I worked with at that point in time. It was perfect. It allowed me to be home with my kids so I could be a part of their growing up and, in those early years. And the Lord just really blessed me during that time. And it was great for me though. And I knew this when I worked in Nashville. I was working for a label and headed up the radio department. And I knew that that was important to me so that if I did get to the point where I was working from home, I could be able to say, you know what, I did everything that I wanted to do with my career. Like I did it all. And being a mom and home all day, like that was super like important to me to be able to feel like I had accomplished what I really wanted to accomplish. So fast forward to, several years, and CMB kind of went from Gospel Music Association to just being on its own so that it could exclusively focus on radio. So it started in 2009 with Momentum. CMB itself started back in like 2002, but it started the conference in 2009. I did not go that year, but the next year in 2010, the one client that I had was like, they were like, we'd really love for you to go to this. And I'm like, okay. So I got to go to this conference and I got to see all these people that I had known for so many years. And when you are in radio promotions and you're working with these radio stations, you build such tight, long lasting relationships over the years. And and it's like a family reunion, right? Like
it's like camp. Any conference is like camp. You're just like, oh, let's take pictures. How are you? Let's catch up.
So for me, it was great to see. And then the next year, I got a call in June of 2011, and they said, hey, we really need somebody to come in and help us. And we'd love for you to do it. And so they were like, it probably will take the CMB board at that time. It'll probably take you about 20 hours a week to do it. And for me, like God had already started preparing me, like pulling out things that like quitting doing this and quitting doing this, like just different things like at church or whatever that I was giving my time to. I don't know. I just felt like I needed to close some of those doors. And then he made it obvious why when this kind of dropped in my lap.
But how long had you like been home with just one client? Like how long was that season?
So it was 7 years.
Okay. Did you know biblically 7 is the number of completion?
Well, there you go. I hadn't really thought about it that way, Rachel. That's amazing. I know.
That's really crazy. So you're 7 years completed
my
that
7
season.
years. So my youngest was 7 when I went back to, work. But I told CMB at that time, it was over the summer. So my kids were out of school. And, but one of the things we did do, which I don't tell very many people this, Rachel, so you're lucky. No, not
hot
lucky.
tea. I'm ready.
It's your hot tea. We had just started fostering in May of 2011. And we had 5-month-old twins with us. So our very first case. And,
wow.
And so then it was like, oh, wait a second, like CMB calls, I've got to do this. How am I going to make this work? But they said only 20 hours. So we're going to go with that. So it ended up being like 80 hours a week.
Oh,
literally.
Yeah.
And probably took more time because I was out of the workforce for 7 years. So I was never sure of myself and I was quadruple checking everything. And I had amazing people Grant Hubbard, Jason Sharp, Chris Limke that were really there to kind of hold my hand and help me understand things. And because I wasn't an event person, I didn't know, oh my goodness, I'm looking at this Disney contract because we did it at Disney. And we have to pay $100 for a dinner and people are paying $199 to attend. Oh, and the second person is $99 and the third person was free. I'm like, this is not a sustainable business model. So that, if I didn't believe God was real before that, I believed he was real after, because it just was, he just carried us through. We didn't know at that time, would CMB continue to be an organization that offers this once a year education, or are we going to be a organization that provides education all year round? Or do we just need to fold up and just say, we're done? We don't feel like this is a good thing. And the board really decided There is nothing out there that's really providing Christian music radio stations what they need in order to be able to do what they do. So that's when it was very evident that, okay, CMB is going to stick around, and they wanted me to stick around as well. So that's really how we got to, okay, thanks for the 80 hours a week. But literally, Rachel, my husband, he would like, I would start at like 9 a.m. and I would work all day. He'd bring me my breakfast. He brought me food. And then I'd go to bed at like 2 a.m. And then I'd like repeated that every day on the weekends. I mean, it was just like, because again, like I'm not an event person. I don't, but it all worked out in the end. And I'm a better person because I learned a lot of trust that year, not only trust in God, but like trusting in people that really were amazing, that if it weren't for them, it wouldn't have ever happened. So anyway, here I am.
I want to touch on like a season that you mentioned, which was you had been out of the workforce for so long, but those connections gave you this opportunity. That had to have been a lot of imposter syndrome and a lot of like self-doubt and a lot of just like, what am I doing? And is this right? Like, how did you navigate that season? And what advice would you have for somebody who's like, I took time out of the music industry to be a mom, but like I've always been conditioned to be told like it's changing so fast and so often, you'll never get back in as soon as you step out. Like, what would you say to them?
I would say, for me back then, because things were moving so fast, I didn't have time to sit there and even think about it. So I'm a 9 on the Enneagram too. So that probably plays a little bit of factor on that. But I was just like thrown into it. But there were times when I was like, why me? Like, I don't, is it really because I'm passionate about radio and passionate about these artists? And really that was a lot of soul searching of like, okay, Lord, like, what do you have in store for me? And how, and it really gives me an opportunity, or gave me an opportunity, to just depend on him at the end of the day, like to carry me through, to know, okay, I may not know what in the world I'm doing, and I am not going to be able to, and even though I still try to go, okay, well, KSBJ is top 5 in their market, but I might not know exactly how many people, and I'm trying to give myself like grace for that, but really trying to go, okay, just breathe and go like, where does God want me in the most places that I can bloom and really make a difference, because we all have qualities, we all have skills and gifts that God has given us. It's just a matter of us trying to find where can we best put those to use. And for God, like for me to look back and just see like the river and the changes and the turns that I had to take to end up where I am now, and really just surrendering and going, okay. And my favorite part about my job, which probably nobody would ever know, but is, I love when we have people speak at our events that are not Christians, because they have incredible interest and knowledge when it comes to mainstream radio. And I feel like we can learn a lot from them. Now, we might have to put a little bit of a spin on it because we are a faith-based radio, but there's several of them that are like, literally, Rachel, they'll say, I don't know what it is about you guys. I love being around you guys. I love being here. Or there's something in the air that I can't even put into words. And so for me, like whether that's a speaker like that, or if it's the hotel personnel, like that's just really a byproduct of trying to do what we're doing that I never thought would be possible. So I would go back to my old self and go, hey, it's going to be hard. It's going to be challenging, but the end result is worth it. And you just need to trust the process, right? Because it's so much easier, like in what you're doing, to kind of like wallow in the misery and go, I don't know what I'm doing and I'm not good enough for this. But I think if you just hang with it and just kind of like chuck through and just, okay, challenge after challenge, then I think the end result is going to be so beautiful.
I want to talk a little bit, because I think a lot of people probably don't know much about this season of your life, but when you led a radio team at a label, how did that come to be? Because we know you went to John Brown, we know you went to GMA, we know you came to Nashville, but then how do you come from like out of college to head a department at a label?
So I when I graduated from college, I went to Nashville for an internship. Internships, like that any students that are part of what we do, I'm like, you got to do an internship because I know how you work as an intern. So it's much easier for me to hire you as an intern versus somebody that I might think has their credentials, but I don't know if they're going to fit my culture or not. And so that's where I started. So I worked at Benson back in the day. So that was, now they're kind of a part of like the Providence system. And it's really about making connections and meeting people and building relationships. So I had some amazing people that I worked with at that time. And so that is what led me then to my entry position in dealing with radio at a record company. It was I went for 3 interviews for 3 different record companies. And this one record company decided to take a chance on me. And I had experience as far as my broadcasting degree goes. And I was running the station at my college campus, but I had never worked like at KSBJ or at a bigger station like that. So that was, that was a big chance. And I think it was interesting because from there, our record company was purchased by another company. So that eventually became Capital Christian Music Group. And I can remember my new boss said to me, he was like, hey, so like, you need to kind of figure out like, where do you want to be in 5 years? Like, what do you want to be over here in this department or over here in this department? And I was like, I don't think you understand what we're doing here. Like, when I just feel like for me, like I'm so passionate about radio and so passionate about serving that community that like there was no other place I wanted to go other than maybe move up that chain. And so I was there and got to learn just from some amazing people and loved my time. And, Bill Hearn, Peter York, some amazing history there with those guys and being able to see like, okay, the new regime being a part of our industry after them, and really having that history. And so that's where then once I kind of had felt like I had served my time there and this other label came in and said, hey, we need somebody to head us up. That just made a lot of sense. I miss those days because I miss my team that I worked with. It was probably one of other than my team now, I will say, but that was one of my favorite teams to work with because we really worked well together. And I love those guys so much. So that's really how I ended up then running this radio department. And you never, ever, I've just learned, like, you never want to burn bridges, right? Because you just never know when you might work for somebody again, or your intern might be your boss someday. You just never know.
You never know. And that's something like, no matter what genre you're in, the more that I've done these conversations, every genre is this small. All of them are this small. I think CCM feels a little different because you have that faith element. So you have this extra common ground, but it's all small and everybody is constantly switching jerseys. And so, yeah, you never want to burn bridges. So it sounds like you've done a really good job in that. I'm curious.
That's right.
No, you have. Otherwise, I mean, if people didn't like you, Michelle, I mean, CMB might not be as successful either, right? If they're like, I don't want to support her. Like, you are such a light and such, like, I know, like you said, 80-hour weeks. And I'm sure that's still continued to this day to a lot of degrees as it's grown. But you don't come across like it. I don't feel the 80 hours on your shoulders when you interact with people.
Well, and that's where you have to go. Like, it is a labor of love, or else I wouldn't do it, because there's plenty other places. Like, I could go back to be an independent promoter and I would not feel the pressures I feel right now. Yeah. Probably make more money doing that. But this is what I'm most passionate about. And so for me, that supersedes so many things.
I want to talk a little bit about CMB Plus that you had announced in 2022, I believe it was, because CMB, I know you've talked about it being radio and all things around radio, but CMB Plus is kind of a new chapter for the organization.
Well, it was a very, very quick chapter because
really?
For a couple of years, our board is made up of other radio stations. So that's the thing we say about CMB is like, we are for radio by radio. So like, it's not like, oh, I started this company and I'm profiting off of it. No, we're a nonprofit and we're just here really to serve. And so, but our board's like, wait a second, like, let's wrestle with the fact that like, is the term broadcasters an antiquated word? Like, what does broadcasters mean to like Gen Z? And so we really wrestled with that and trying to go, we want to kind of extend our borders so that we're not just going, here's how you do a stop set on the radio, but yet encompass more of the opportunities that radio has. So as we kind of like, long meeting, massaged it, we couldn't come up with anything. Like it was a, Christian music media. Well, okay, well, what does that even mean? Because like media can mean television, it can mean film, it can mean so many more things. And we still wanted to stay like in that radio space. So
because then you could start getting like TBN and stuff,
right.
And they show up and they're like, this has nothing for me.
And we don't want that. Like we wanted to be able to say what it is. So as we kind of talked about it, we're like, well, maybe we're CMB Plus. Like we're more than just broadcasters. And we really kind of had all these like, okay, but what, like, it's also like plus meaning like we're forward thinking. And it also means like we're positive. There were all these entendres on them. Right. And so we made this big announcement at Momentum and like, this was what we were going to do. So then we decided we were going to, it was our year. Every couple of years, we totally do an overhaul on our website. So we brought in a company, Dunham and Company, to help us overdo and update our website. And they came to us and that's all that they were supposed to do. And they were like amazing people. Amazing. And they were like, could we talk you guys into not doing CMB Plus? And I was like, so we just like made this huge announcement at Momentum that we're doing this. And we're in the process of like changing everything over to that. We already had merch made for it. And so, but their rationale was so on point. Like, see, the word plus can seem like it may be only like in the streaming world. So like you have Disney Plus or like ESPN Plus. Well, so would it be mixed signals to say CMB Plus when people might relate that to those other types of media? And so when we came down to it, and they heard what we were saying. It's all about reaching more people in more places, in more platforms. So they came to us with, they heard us out and they were like, we really think that you should just do like CMB. And so that's really how we landed on, we're going to be CMB. We're going to move forward. And we're going to hope nobody, like, we're going to say, hey, like we were going to do CMB Plus, but we wanted to make the most sense for you, our community. And this is what makes the most sense. I think what it came down to, Rachel, was that we were trying to be innovative with our name, but we were already innovative in what we do. So we had to really kind of like rest in that going, okay, we're already forward thinking. We're already thinking about spaces that we can help push radio in that direction. And hopefully our name of CMB would be able to just resonate with people because of the legacy it does have. We started in 2002. So here we are, many years later and we're still going. So
what's a lesson that you learned from that? Because that's a really tumultuous thing and a lot of pressure. I'm sure you had a big like moment when they're like, you should not do that. And you're like, I've already announced it. We have merch. We spent money. And like, this was the final step. What's the lesson you've learned in this?
Well, I guess it was probably to be like humble because I don't want to make mistakes, right? Like we have such a high standard of excellence for what we do. And so like to say that like, oh, so like even that, like wrestling, like how do we make this a big deal? Or do we just kind of like, which at Momentum, that's when I announced, hey, we were going to go in this direction. We're still going there. It's just a matter of not trying to be confusing with our name. And hopefully we'll still draw people. And you know what? Honestly, Rachel, we still deal with like the word broadcasters can be seen in so many different ways, you know?
Yeah.
Like with our CMB University event that we do, that's for university students that are interested in broadcasting. Well, they may be like, I really don't want to be on the radio. Well, that's the thing, is that like at a radio station, there's so many more positions than just being on air or a program director. Like they need people who understand marketing. They need people who understand what it looks like to lead the next generation of listeners, you know, those kind of things that are important. And so really the word broadcasters is the term is absolutely applicable. It means to be able to broadcast a message. So whatever that looks like, you're broadcasting a message. That's what we do. But yet, if the perception isn't there, then we've got to figure out how do we communicate that message without watering down what we do. So
I love that. And honestly, you talked about broadcasting and how it can be kind of this archaic term a little bit. However, Instagram just launched broadcast channels. So now Gen Z is getting used to the whole term of broadcast again.
Yes, which is great, right? I mean,
yeah.
And like what you do with your podcast, like that's an extension of broadcasters, right? So trying to help these radio stations go, what does podcasting look like for a radio station? And really trying to do the research in, are listeners listening to podcasts? Well, they are. And 75% of Christian music listeners if they listen to a podcast, they're listening to a faith-based podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So that is interesting to know, because if that's the case, then are these radio stations providing the content so that at the end of the day, it's more like a radio station is really like an umbrella, right? So you have Hope Media Group, and one of their spokes or one of their, tenants is going to be radio, but then also YouTube might be one of their channels. Podcasting might be a channel. There's all these other opportunities that are under the umbrella of Hope Media Group. And this won't change, that KSBJ or that WAFM frequency is still going to be the mothership. I don't know, maybe that's not the right word, but that's going to be the foundation, because that's the biggest voice. Those are the biggest listeners. There's way more listeners on radio than there are in those other spaces. So why would you alienate radio and alienate your terrestrial dial to go, I'm going to go in this direction? Well,
and give it to somebody else too.
Absolutely.
When you leave, somebody swoops in.
That's right. Exactly.
I'm curious. So we've talked about how kind of the Gen Z younger generation might think radio is a little archaic or like not really as prevalent anymore. And we've talked about how 75% of Christian music listeners, if they're listening to a podcast, it's a faith-based podcast. You've been throwing out really, really incredible and important data. What are some sources that you use to stay up to date on what's happening in the radio world?
So it's important, because if we don't have our pulse on radio, who will?
Yeah, you're
right?
shooting in the dark. Right,
exactly. And it doesn't really show that like the passion that we have in trying to keep radio feeling focused onto what they need to do, right? So some of the things would be like what Edison Research does. Like they have their share of the ear, and like that is basically showing what percentage of somebody's listening to any sort of audio, what share are they giving to radio, what share are they giving to podcasting, basically breaking that down. And you can go, they have it, it's also called the infinite dial. Like those are places where anybody can go and see the research that they provide and be able to see, oh, wait, this is information that would be relevant to not only radio, but other forms. So, I think that keeping your finger on the pulse is so critical. We do our own research project with a company called Jacobs Media. They do it for secular radio. They do it like NPR, and they call it Tech Survey. And for us, they just focus on Christian radio stations. So we have about 30 radio stations that participate, and it is surveying the audience and trying to figure out what does the audience want. And that has helped us see, okay, case in point, like the number one reason that people, according to this survey, and this is consistent across the board, the number one reason that people listen to Christian music radio is because it plays the music they like. And so if that's the case, then, and also Christian music radio is the number one new music discovery source. So if that's the case from radio,
Christian radio is.
Well, for Christian songs. So if somebody's going to find a new song, they're going to find it first on Christian radio. So if that's the case, then you kind of go to Christian radio. Like if I'm a record company and I'm going, hey, your listeners are telling us that they are going to hear new music first on you. Don't you want to be the source of new music for them? So it would be in your best advantage to be able to, highlight that fact, market that, and let your listeners know you're going to hear new music here. And not, you know what I'm saying when I say this, but like there are some people that might go, hey, I'm not going to add any songs this week. And then the next week, I'm not going to add any songs. Well, then you are doing a disservice to your listeners if that's the case. So I think that understanding your listeners, and that's what I love about the tech survey, is it gives us an overall view of these radio stations, but then each station gets their own market specific data so they can see what their own listeners are saying. The biggest problem, if I'm being completely honest, the biggest problem is that it's harder and harder to get the younger generations to take this survey. So trying to figure out how do we help these stations be able to draw in younger demos to be able to get numbers from them, because we want to find out where they're going. And, that we brought in Tracy Johnson, who does a lot on the mainstream side. We brought him in for a summit a couple months ago to talk about how do you get that younger generation to be able to participate in your studies, because we need to know what they're thinking. Because what you said earlier, their perception is that music, the only source for music is either Spotify or Pandora. But the reality is that's not the case. So how do we help them see the bigger picture than just Spotify or Pandora? So I have this here. I wasn't planning on showing you this, so sorry if I jacked it.
No, I love this.
Well, we do this. So this is what we put out. I don't know. You want me to show you?
Yeah.
Anyway, this is we provide this for our radio stations. We did this at our summit. And so the best thing about this research is that it shows that the net promoter score for Christian music radio is an 82. So an 82 is like off the charts. I don't know. Do you know what a net promoter score? Because it's not a term we would use every day. Yep.
It's not a term I would know.
Okay. So I'd love to tell you. So a net promoter score is every company should be doing a net promoter score. Costco has one, Starbucks has one, Target, Walmart, all of these companies have one. You can Google what's the net promoter score for Costco, and it's probably going to come up probably like a 75. It's never 100. I don't know why. I didn't create the formula, but there's a formula. So like when you do a survey, you say how much or on what number would you say that you would recommend this station to a friend or family?
Oh, so okay. Yeah.
On a scale of 1 to 10. So they have this formula that's put together. They throw out some of the numbers and then they come up with this score. So Christian music radio is 82. So we highlight that on this little thing right here. So see,
yeah.
82. So then you can see country is the next one at 57. So that's a huge gap.
That's a huge gap.
Christian music radio has the highest loyalty and the highest net promoter score of any format that's out there. So we go, okay, this is great information. So what are you going to do with it? As a radio station, how are you going to maximize on trying to take these kind of like these amplifiers, these big fans of your station, and be able to use them to help spread the word of what you do, of who you are? Because right now, Christian radio is meeting a need and going to be able to fill a void that no other radio format is going to be able to do. And that's the hope and the love and the encouragement that they're able to offer. Because sure, you can go listen to Spotify, but you have no hope and encouragement other than maybe if you get that from the music, which you will.
Well, no community.
There's no community. Exactly. And that's what people need. And the more we get into like the technological advances where people are more at home and not getting out of their, house, basically, right? So then you're going,
Yeah.
hey, like this is a way for them to connect with others and to feel, that's why they feel like such a connection. Like Caleb just did this tour, which was brilliant, because they're a network. So how are they going to make sure that they serve their local communities? And with that, you go, okay, so they go on the road, they do, I don't know, 10 cities. I don't know. Don't quote me on that, but they do all these markets, and they go in and they bring their morning show and they connect their morning show with the listeners, and the listeners showed up massively.
Oh yeah,
because
totally.
They want to meet Skip and Amy. They want to be able to spend time with them, and this might be the only time that they can do that. That's why, like, they do these Christian cruises. So they do the Caleb Cruise or the Caleb Fan Awards, and they can have all the artists there. That's awesome, and that definitely is intriguing to people. But when they know that they can go on these cruises and they get to meet Carlos, that really like takes it up a couple of notches. And they're like, when else would I get to meet Carlos and see Matthew West on a stage? So for the Christian music consumer, we like to look at radio as kind of like a one-stop shop, right? Because you may go to the Baptist church in town, and I might go to the Catholic church, and my neighbor might go to the Presbyterian church. But at the end of the day, there only might be one faith-based radio station that you listen to that's going to bring all of those religions or organizations or whatever it is, all the people that have some sort of faith in their lives. This might be the only place that you have to bring together. So if I have a movie and I want to go into a city like Nashville and talk about this movie, the radio station is the best mouthpiece that I have to reach all those people who are listening to that radio station. So that's where the community that you were talking about definitely comes in as well.
Well, and it's a guaranteed audience in that city. Whereas aside from local news and local radio, you don't really have any way to communicate with the people in that town at all. Spotify's not going to do it for you. Pandora's not going to do it for you. YouTube's not going to do it for you. So the local aspect of radio is so important. And I think that's the way to really bring in the younger audience. We just need to figure out a cutting edge way to do it. I'm curious, as we're talking about the younger audience, can we talk a little bit about CMBU? Because I wish that I had known or that this existed when I was in college. And I think it's so genius that it happens like Friday to Saturday. So you don't have to take a lot of time off school, or maybe it's Saturday, Sunday. So it's just a weekend.
It has been Friday and Saturday. So
okay.
You're right on that. But this year it's Saturday and Sunday. Yeah.
Okay. So both are correct. But I really want to talk about CMB University.
Okay. Well, we, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago, we're like, hey, where's our farm team? We had all these people going, I have this position that I'm trying to hire for, and I don't know where to get people from. And what is CMB doing to help us like populate our future? So it really was a challenge for us to start something for students, which we do it at Momentum. We offer Momentum. We lose money on every student that comes, but for us, that's super critical to have those students there. And I love, several students have told me, they're like, I love coming to Momentum because I don't feel like I'm a kid. Like I feel like people respect me. And so I love that, and so like taking that to the next level, because Momentum there's just so many things going on. We can't really hone in on things that would be important for a student to learn. So we created this 2019 was our first year to do it. And then COVID kind of screwed things up. So this year will be our fourth year that we've done it. And it's in Nashville. So that, that's such a great centralized location for so many colleges. We've had several colleges be a part of what we do. And so it really just made sense for them to, hey, like y'all are a part of Momentum. Let's like keep that going, but also what does that look like to create this college program? So we really kind of landed at this point of offering this 2-day event. It's not about education, because at the end of the day, these students are getting educated at their schools, right? Like they're going to learn how to, if I'm in Brian McIntyre's class over at Olivet, I'm totally going to learn okay, how do I build a radio station? So it doesn't have anything to do with that. It's more about what did it look like for Rachel to get to the position she's in right now? So what was her career path? What did she graduate from college, or did she? How did she land her first job? And then what are the resources that she used through her experience to get to where she is? And then for the students to be able to learn not only from the label side, but also for somebody that's on air. And we'll have somebody that'll do that when it looks, from programming or all these different positions at a radio station. So they get to hear what that is. And there's no other place where they can really connect with people on that level. And they're all industry leaders that they know. We also bring in mentors. So we'll have, several mentors at every single table, because we feel like that is really important. And that's what the students want. They want to meet, like, how do I even get my foot into this industry? Well, I always say at CMBU, you should walk away with a card from every single person that's here, because one of those people may be your future boss, or could be more than that, right? So who knows? But at the end of the day, you need to make sure you've got connections with these people. We also do, I'm super excited about this year. Not that I haven't been excited about other years, because they've all been amazing. But this year,
good. It's good that you're excited about this year. That means it keeps getting better.
Well, it's so hard to go, like, how are we going to beat last year, right?
Yeah.
But Natalie Grant's going to come, and we're going to do a live interview. So Mandy Young, who's the VP of programming for Caleb and Air One, she's going to come and show us, what does it look like to interview an artist? And we did this years ago, and it was so cool, because it was like, okay, I'm going to ask Natalie this question. So Natalie, tell me about your family. And Natalie might go down a road that, like, you were not expecting. And so how do you, as an on-air talent, how do you caress the situation and bring Natalie back on track so that she is hitting where you want to go? Or what are you doing to find out, Natalie, what is your goal by doing this interview? Like, are we wanting to let people know you've got a new record coming out, your tour with Bernie? Like, what are your goals, so that it's a win for everybody? Because if it's a win for everybody, then the listener's going to win too, right? So if
that sounds like something I need for this podcast, is like, I want Mandy to train me. That's awesome.
Mandy, I mean, she is amazing on air. Like, and so I was so thrilled when she's like, I would love to do it, So we have her, and for Natalie to spend time doing this too, we're just totally delighted. And really, that allows us to invest in these students and give them the fire and the passion, because at some point in time, who knows how long I'm going to be here? I want somebody else that has this passion that can really, take it to the next level. And we tell these students, we're like, you guys are the ones that may have to figure out how you change the whole course of what people listen to, or what that next big idea is for radio stations to incorporate to reach more of Gen Z. Because I'm old. I don't know what Gen Z is going to want.
Oh my gosh.
So I got to figure that out, right? So anyway, that's and really, this is just an opportunity for them to feel like they're part of our community, because they are, obviously, but also for them to be able to connect with people that they wouldn't have an opportunity to otherwise. Because at Momentum, they may have that chance. We do set up mentoring there, but it's just different. This is more where everything is focused on those students. How can we pour into them and give them a love for the music industry and a love for their radio stations, so that we see growth? And there's nothing better than to see one of those students end up at one of our radio stations. Like, that is like the pinnacle, right? Like going,
That's
okay,
so cool.
Yes. Like, or to see students come, honestly, to go, you know what? I've been on this faith journey, and I don't even know what that means. And so for them to be like, take a step back and go, what does Christian music radio even mean? And for them to be enlightened in a whole different way than they would have if they had not come to CMBU.
I am obsessed with CMBU, like, so much so, because I feel like it's what I do on the podcast, but just for like CMB and for broadcasting. Yes. And it's so important, because to your point, we need marketing. We need social media managers. We need digital marketing. We need somebody who can lead people. We need creatives. We need on-air talent. We need people who are techie and good with cameras. And that's just, I think, not where people's brains go. It's not where my brain went when I was thinking of a career path of like, oh, I can do this for a radio station. Like that might be an easier way to get some experience and get my foot in, and like a good community to be a part of and gain some mentors. And instead of going for the jobs everybody else is going for, it's just really important that you guys are doing that. And I love it. I love chatting with you all the time because I can always just feel your energy and your passion, and it hasn't dwindled once in the years that I've known you. And so I'm curious, do you believe you're living the dream?
I do. But if you ask me around momentum time, I might question that. Fortunately, like we've tried to get in a groove where it's not quite as big of an undertaking. And now we've got a lot of systems in place, and which has been great. On my team, we hired our first guy. And so
I know.
So that's, we've got, 5 women and John. Like in 2019, our conference was in Orlando in September, and it ended up getting canceled because of a hurricane. There's nothing that will send you into PTSD quicker than that. Like, because you've just worked all year long for these 4 days, and all like so there's no payoff, and then we hit 2020 again. The payoff looked different that year with virtual momentum. And so that, 2021 was a great year. I just love that year. We didn't, we weren't at the max capacity that we've been before with our momentum events, but we were able to, there was just a different camaraderie there, and just like love, because we were all together. We really hadn't been together since 2018. And so for us, like that momentum is like the payoff, or our events are the payoff where you go, okay, the work is all worth it, And I love CMBUs. Like when people like you come and be a part of it, it just takes it up to the next level, because it's people like you that have a love for our next generation and can identify with them in so many different ways. Like we can't do CMBU on our own. It takes amazing people like you to be a part of it. You're passionate about what you do, and that spreads to them as well. So thank you for being a part of CMBU.
I love being part of it. It's truly like, I don't know. I love it so much. I was a mentor last year, and it was just great to get to know and to see the future in these students' faces, and to know like, yeah, we could be peers one day, and that day could be really soon because things happen fast. Thanks for listening to the Springboard Music Podcast. If there's something that resonated with you in this episode, or an episode that you would like for us to create in the future, please do not hesitate to reach out to us at Springboard Music on Instagram.